Welcome to the Unlocking Senior Resources podcast by Leave the Key. I'm Larry Wagner, and I've spent 30 years working with seniors where I was a certified senior advisor and the last 15 years in the home buying industry as a certified senior transition specialist, where I specialize in dealing with seniors going through a transition in their lives. This podcast is for seniors, those with seniors they love, and people who work in the senior community. In each episode, we bring on a guest who works to improve the lives of seniors. This podcast is your key to unlocking senior resources. Hello, we're here today with Melanie Stephen from Allegiant Homecare.
Yeah.
Welcome, Melanie. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Very well. So, you work with Allegiant Homecare.
Correct.
You've had a career before getting to Allegiant.
Yes.
How did you get here?
It was kind of just happened that I wound up in this industry. I always joke around because prior to this, I worked in fertility and IVF. So I said I went from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Extremely different, yeah.
Yeah. In the middle, I worked at gyms, but somebody kind of just took a chance on me, and I did start at another home care agency prior, and then I worked at a few assisted livings. So I feel pretty well-rounded in backgrounds when it comes to senior care.
There you go. And how long are you there?
I've been with Allegiant for almost 2 years now, and in the industry for around 10.
Around 10 years. Okay, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Because I see when I speak to people, they're all different pedigrees as far as how they got here and how long they've been there.
Right.
So, okay, you've been in the industry for 10 years. You should know what you're doing by now.
Yeah, one would assume.
But
No one happened to me do that.
Absolutely. So,
it is my passion, though. So, I have to say, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here forever.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I've always had, every career I've had has been a passion. And some people go through their whole lives and never have that. And I feel so badly for those people. So, in fact, you've had it, and you've had it at least for the 10 years. That's wonderful. But when I looked at the website, so Allegiant Homecare is related to AccordCare?
Correct. So I know it does get a little confusing. Yeah. I'm glad they both start with A. So I'm on a list. I'm usually up at the top.
There you go.
Yeah. So AccordCare is our parent company. Mm-hmm. We're based out of Atlanta, Georgia. We do have offices in Florida, Georgia, and then pretty much New York, from downstate to Niagara and Buffalo. And I always say it really gives us the ability to tap into that larger company dynamic with the corporate resources out of state, but you still have the mom and pop feel because we do have 3 local offices, one in Holbrook, one in Carl Place, and one in Brooklyn.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you really are. So you cover Long Island.
Correct.
And that's great. And yet you're right. They have the technology of the big companies and so on. Small boutique companies can't have.
I always say, too, God forbid, if there's some type of natural disaster, if a Sandy situation,
right.
Hopefully we could get generators here, or we could do things to kind of address some of the issues that might be happening locally. So.
Right. Well, that makes sense. You're right, because when you have such a geographic
footprint.
Yeah.
Oh, I just hit my microphone.
Oh, there you go. It takes practice. You have to be an expert like me. Although pretty much every recording I hit it at least once.
Oh, really?
You see, yeah.
I was like,
so
I
said
made for Italians.
You're an expert like me. You hit it just like I do.
Yeah, thank you.
There you go. So explain let me ask a question. So is the name Allegiant just the New York name, or is that the name?
Yes.
Going
so they're all under the Accord umbrella, but we have Health Force, which is up the Niagara area, Buffalo. We have Nightingale in Florida. AccordCare is the Georgia brand. And then we also have Certified Agency in Florida as well. So we have a snowbird program, which helps people who decide that they want to travel down to Florida. Will help to make sure that they have consistent flow of care from each geographical area.
I was going to ask this question later, but you kind of opened the door, and that is, as far as certified, there are different levels of certification.
Correct.
Without going to more detail than necessary, that seems like it could be a whole.
That's not my forte.
Right.
I'm over-explainer, but I'll try.
Okay, so let's keep it simple. Just sort of go through so what. Basically, so people know what they're kind of the kind of certification they're looking for.
Correct. Okay. So, especially in New York State, there's kind of like acronyms for everything. It's like a government thing, I suppose. So in New York State, we have certified agencies, and they call them CHAs, which handle all skilled care. So it's PT, OT, speech, wound care, and skilled nursing services. It's a short-term agency and typically kind of gets triggered, I guess you could say, after a hospital stay or a rehab stay, or basically anybody who's really homebound, because you can still activate those services from the community.
And you said a CHA. What does CHA stand for?
It's Certified Home Health Agency.
Okay.
So it's kind of like just a little bit of a different verbiage where we're home care, that's considered home health.
Okay.
Then you have licensed agencies, which are called LHCSAs. So it's LHCSA. If you ask me what that stands for, I'll hit you.
We'll let it go. We'll let it go.
Not like you're a microphone.
There's a table between us. Go ahead.
But LHCSAs are licensed home care agencies. We are more that long-term solution to care and really focus on personal care. So that's bathing, grooming, dressing, toileting, medication reminders, hydration reminders, meal preparation, light housekeeping, laundry, fall management, things like that, right? So that is what my agency is. We're a licensed home care agency. Some home care agencies can provide these services, but they don't have that license through New York State, which is critical because of the amount of oversight that goes into being a licensed agency.
Right.
And then there's companion services, which is really light duty, more like having a friend or a family member that kind of steps into a role. So it's just no hands-on care.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned about certified or licensing. Is there a time? Because I've heard people get misled by the type of licensure people have or organizations have.
Because I feel like sometimes, and not sometimes, I would say majority of the time, you're kind of forced into these conversations not willingly. It's usually in a time of crisis, and you really don't have so much time to really do a lot of research.
Right.
And
it's complicated.
It's so complicated. I'm still learning things every day, believe it or not. I mean, sometimes I'm told I know it all day.
But in
between those,
in between those tasks.
But there's a lot of information. It's always fluid and changing. But the main thing really is to find out are you dealing with a licensed agency? Are you dealing with certified home health aides who have gone and gotten their certificate through New York State? Is the agency you're working with, insured, they bonded, so God forbid an issue happens, you have protection through that agency.
Right.
We drug screen our aides, we do background checks, we start every case with a registered nurse who comes in and becomes your manager of clinical practice, and it's a full-time employee. It's not that he just dips in and dips out. These are things that most people don't think to ask because you don't know that it's not a standard, I guess, across the board.
You're correct.
Right? So some people, yes, they're licensed to do business in the state of New York, but they might not be a licensed home care agency with the oversight of Department of Health.
What's the specific question a prospective client would ask to discern that?
I would say, are you a LHCSA or are you a licensed home care agency?
Okay.
I find out if they are.
Not that you have a license, but you're a licensed home care agency.
Are you a licensed home care agency through the state of New York, Department of Health?
There you go. Very specific.
Go through a line.
Okay, write that down. A licensed home care agency in the state of New York. Got it.
I should have told you in the beginning.
Yeah.
A pen, paper, so you can write down my phone number and email address also.
We'll get to that. I won't forget. If I do, you remind me.
Yeah, no.
So you're a home health care agency.
Mm-hmm.
You're a licensed home health care agency. There are numerous licensed home health care agencies here on Long Island and in New York and so on. What differentiates you from other agencies? Why should people call you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, because it's me.
I agree with that.
Every agency has a Melanie.
That's right.
Or Melanie Stephen, I should say. All of a sudden, there are a couple of other Melanies that popped up, and I'm like, I have to start using my last name now. This is like awkward. But that's fine. So I guess really what sets us apart, we have very detailed programs, not only training programs that our aides go through to provide a level of care that we find to be appropriate. So we have dementia specific training. We have PTSD training because we do work with a lot of veterans since we are one of the VA's contracted home care agencies. Their service-connected disability pension.
You work with old people, but not necessarily.
No, not necessarily.
Right.
I have a younger population because, another thing that sets us apart is that we're not just private pay.
Right.
Anybody deserves to get care, not just based off of their economic status, Right. So we work with a lot of Medicaid programs. One of those programs is a TBI program. So I do have younger people who, suffered a traumatic brain injury and they need a high level of care. So as long as you're over the age of 18, we don't do pediatric at this time.
Right.
Anybody who needs personal care assistance, we can assist them. Another differentiator for us is we really tailor our intakes to the top 10 diagnoses that lead to hospitalization for seniors, because I know we say we do care for younger people, but most of our demographic is older.
Right.
So whether it be congestive heart failure, COPD, chronic UTI, kidney failure, chronic falling, these things, we have a reach out program, which basically directs our caregivers to look out for specific symptoms and relay that to the nurse who's their manager of clinical practice. And then we intervene before it gets to the hospitalization.
I was just speaking with somebody who's in rehab and had a UTI, ended up back in the hospital. Go ahead. Oh, I see this is possibly an emergency call. We're going to take a break for a moment. No, not necessary. Okay. She ended up in the hospital for 3 days. So it's what actually started her in the hospital was a UTI and the complications. An older woman, 90 years old. She ends up in rehab.
Yes.
She gets, after 2 weeks of rehab, she gets another UTI, ends up back in the hospital, goes back to rehab, and we got her doctor's note to tell the people at the facility to please just test her regularly for UTI.
Yeah.
So we can't do that. They said, "Were you incapable?" No, unless the order comes from our doctor, we're not going to do that.
Oh my gosh.
And doc said he won't do unless there's symptoms. Why don't we be proactive?
Right.
Which seems like what you're talking about. Let's be proactive to avoid the symptoms to get from this 9-year-old from going to the hospital for the 3rd time in the last 2 months.
Yes.
And they didn't want to do it. And guess what? She got a 3rd UTI.
Right.
So
and it's sometimes too that it becomes resistant to antibiotics. They have to be on IV antibiotics. We do have relationships with other community partners, one of which is an in-home urgent care program or model that our nurse, if we see, okay, we know this person is chronic UTI, if we see they might have a cognitive change in status or whatever, which is one of the symptoms, because it can almost mimic a dementia in a way.
That's what happened.
So we can trigger this company to come into the home to test for the UTI and prophylactically start those antibiotics and keep them out of the hospital. Because it just, somebody who already has all these health issues, you send them to the hospital, they're going to do a whole panel.
Correct.
Well, we know where they're going to find something, and then it's 3-day stay. Then they wind up in a skilled nursing facility, and every day in that facility sets them back almost a week as far as muscle wasting. So, just to break that cycle is so important. And that's why we started this whole program. And we have these cards that are left in the home. So even if we're not there, the family members can access that too and say, I noticed something's going on here. Or even diabetes, they can know I need to check skin integrity. And if they see a wound, nip that in the bud because it's just going to get into a really bad, situation there.
Correct. That makes sense. I'm so thrilled to hear you do that.
Yeah, thank you.
I just heard this story.
Yeah, and that's a very common situation, and I think it's just an old school type of mentality with certain things, or maybe their reimbursement's not where it should be, and maybe they would check.
That's what I was saying. So aren't you getting paid for the insurance company for this or Medicare for this?
I know.
I said at least you're making money on it. You may as well do it, and it makes sense, but
Right.
they wouldn't do it. I give them credit for not doing something they didn't think was necessary, even though they'd probably get paid. But it was a bad decision regardless, and it turned out to be a bad decision because she got the third UTI. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to get on my soapbox on that one, but you appreciate exactly where I'm coming from because you guys cover this.
Yes, and that's why we have, like
Yeah.
I said, these programs are in place.
Well, that's really good to hear that. Are there other, besides you and what you said, what other differentials are there, or?
I mean, I guess
So that's the big ones?
really like the main
Okay.
ones, really.
Mhm.
We also have like a lower minimum
Right.
than some agencies, which are
Right.
like another question you can ask
Right.
when you're calling around. We only have a 4 consecutive hour daily minimum.
Right.
Most agencies want at least 6 hours,
Right.
but we'll do 4.
Right.
And we could do 3 days a week, where some companies won't do that either.
Oh, wow.
So, we try to tailor the schedule to the actual need, as opposed to saying like, well, we have this minimum.
Right.
Well, maybe they don't really need that.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean they won't one day.
Right.
And typically things over time are going to, amp up, but we can start and kind of like let them dip their toe into the scenario. And most of the time they do increase on their own. But
Right.
yeah.
Okay, that's interesting to know. So, how long's the company been around?
Combined, I think it's close to 30 years, I want to
Right.
say, between all the different acquisitions
Right.
that went on.
Right.
I have some caregivers that have been around for a very long time. We have a lot of longevity, which also says something about our company.
That's probably the first thing I would have said.
Yeah, I guess we can add that in.
Well, that ain't.
No.
So, we'll reverse it. We'll flip the order.
Exactly. But yeah, office workers and the caregivers,
Right. Right.
because we treat them well. I want to say it's the mission. I always get confused between our mission and our, what's those other 3 things? You have a mission,
Your purpose,
purpose and whatever. But anyway, our thing is, to help everybody live their best possible life.
Right.
And I always say that's not just for our clients, that's for our employees, that's for our family members, everybody's live our best possible life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So with that said, okay. So with that said,
Popular.
they're so popular today, but even if we never leave phone on during recording, but things are going on right now that we have to.
Yes.
So
the type of business this is. God, I hate
it really is. So it is the nature, and my phone, I'm waiting for something too, but it's mine. I better keep mine off camera. So so question for you, your role in the company. Why don't you describe your role a little bit?
So I'm the area manager of business development. I cover all of Long Island. Our service area, though, is the full island, and then all of the boroughs,
Right.
and a little bit of Westchester.
Right.
And yes, Staten Island is a little bit of both for everybody,
Yeah.
but we try our best.
So poor Staten Island.
I know. I don't know what the issue is with that, but so I cover this whole area. I always say I'm kind of like dual faceted. So I do the professional development, and then I also work with the families directly.
You do work the families directly.
So, when someone gives out my information, but they're contacting me, I do a very thorough intake, go through the entire process, and then I send that over and kind of pass the baton to our branch directors, and then we kind of go from there. So I'm the point of contact for like everything.
So once you do the intake,
yes,
are you done with that family, or are you the person they still reach out to, or they have now a new person?
They can always reach out to me if they have any questions or concerns. But really, like once everything is kind of up and running, I have great support as far as my local branches. And like I said, I kind of pass it on to them because I am always working with new families that are starting, and it's a lot of volume to just kind of manage. They'll also have like a dedicated staffing coordinator who they become very friendly with.
Right.
If they need to switch their schedule or want to add hours or whatnot, they had that point of contact too.
Right.
But I have people kind of get like attached to me.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny, like by the time the end of some conversations, they're like, okay, hi, goodbye, sweetie.
You're right. That's
So
it happens to me all the time.
If we cry,
Yes.
and it's like,
Right.
it's a bonding experience, really.
It's a very emotional time.
It is. It is.
I sort of two questions with this.
Yeah.
When you're doing the intake and talking to people, how often, I don't know if I want to say how often, what percentage or whatever, are you dealing with just the senior versus the senior and their family?
I would say it's probably like 85% of the time it's family. Yeah, it's usually like power of attorney, healthcare proxy, the adult children, or friends. Like recently I've had, like where they don't really have family. So the friends kind of step into that role for them, which is wonderful. But yeah, I typically don't deal directly with the client themselves.
Right.
Or a spouse, it kind of depends. But yeah, it's usually not the client. And it's funny though, because I do have 3 liaisons that cover Manhattan and the boroughs. And one of them really deals more with the family. So I don't know why that is or how that really happens, but it's typically family.
I would imagine so. Being a house buyer, the reason I got to meet you, and I'll get to what I was about to say in a moment, but just I'm going to ask, what extracurricular activities do you participate in, which is how I met you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
GPNY,
right.
One of my favorite networking groups.
Right.
It's the Gerontology Professionals of New York. So I'm on the board as the vice president for that. And we meet the first Thursday of every month, and it's a lunchtime meeting.
And they're very good lunches.
I know. Yeah, they really do treat us well.
Yeah.
And it's a great group of people. And it's just opened many doors and resources. So, I can really help lead my family that I work with if they need help with things.
Right.
But that's like the main thing, I guess. And then I love doing things like this podcast.
The outreach. Yeah, I got involved with your group.
Hi, I'm Larry. And I'm Ben. We're the father and son team of Leave the Key home buyers, and we want to buy your house.
We specialize in working with seniors who are transitioning out of their homes, and we understand what you were going through.
So if you're considering selling your home and would like an alternative to the traditional overwhelming process, reach out and see how we can help.
Do you have an outdated home?
No need to update anything.
Have a home that needs repairs?
Don't bother with repairs.
Don't want to take everything with you?
Leave whatever you want behind.
Dreading the headaches that come with agents?
Sell your home without paying a commission.
Dreading prying neighbors attending open houses and passing judgment on your home?
No need for public showings.
When you sell to us, you'll have all the certainty of closing on your timeline, not someone else's, and there's absolutely no pressure.
Visit leavethekey.com or call us today for a no-obligation offer at 631-388-7771 if you want to sell your home today.
Because, matter of fact, they just interviewed Adam, another board member, and I used him. He's the one who placed my in-laws. Oh. So I got to know him, and it's like about 80% of the houses we're house buyers. About 80% of the houses we buy are from either senior citizens or the families of senior citizens because they passed. So we deal with the same community, right. And if it's a senior citizen who's moving us, they're not well. I'm never dealing with just them. I'm dealing with them and the kids. Yeah. So I have the same kind of experience as you do, and the sweeties at the end of the calls as well. Not from the kids, but from the parents. Yeah. But I'm the same age as most of the kids when I'm dealing with them. Right. So which is very interesting. Matter of fact, I'm just talking to someone right now who was actually in my high school graduating class. Oh, wow. And dealing with Dad's house, and so we're the same exact age. So right. I really am literally the same age as the people I deal with. But it's you mentioned it's all about rapport. We're talking about and getting to know the family, and we deal with people in very different parts of the times of their life. Sometimes because sometimes they're moving to a facility and need care as well, or whatever the case. Right. You deal with home care, but I assume like my mother had home care in the facility because she aged in the facility. She actually developed Lewy body dementia, so it was very fast aging. Yeah. But so she had full-time care while she was in independent living. Oh, so I mean, that's something you would do as well as far as arrangement.
I provide care anywhere somebody calls home. Correct. So in an assisted living, independent living. Yeah. I do a lot of bedside care within skilled nursing facilities also.
Within skilled nursing.
Yes, because there's such a shortage right now of caregivers. So sometimes families just want like a little extra support or somebody to sit with their loved one and keep them company, or,
Right.
make sure they don't try to get out of bed and fall in a rehab or something like that. So we can go into that setting as well. I always say it's more of like a companion level where we don't do any of the hands-on care. It's more of like advocacy.
Right. Which is really necessary.
Yes.
It's I've been going through a family, the love advocacy that's required. We think we're living in downstate New York, one of the most expensive place to live in the country. We're paying a fortune for care if we're in a facility. Yeah. You expect care commensurate with the price, but you still have to advocate.
Yeah.
And
every community kind of has like different ratios, depending on what type of license like these assisted livings have, right? And that's why sometimes, we can kind of layer into that, because you can still get community Medicaid in an assisted living, or definitely in an independent living. So, that helps to bridge, the gap if there's like, just not enough caregivers.
Correct.
We do have a school, which I should have brought up too. So we train home health aides in Suffolk County. So luckily, I don't have a shortage of caregivers. And, it definitely blessed. I knock on wood. But yeah, it's a crazy world out there right now.
Home health care aides, there's always tough getting.
Yeah.
We are very lucky. My mother, I've said this in the podcast numerous times, we had one that was with her for 3 years. But she needed 24-hour care, so she wasn't her only aide.
Right.
So,
but like 4 caregivers.
Right now, we had 2 at a time.
Oh, okay.
We had 2. They slept. They became live-in.
Okay, yeah. So that's another terminology too. So live-in is really considered like 13 hours of care.
Okay.
Because they are supposed to sleep throughout the night, which 24-hour care is like 2 12-hour shifts where it has to flirt and orient to 24 hours a day. So it's just 168 hours as opposed to like 13 times 7.
I got it. That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's like a little different. And there was a lot of laws that changed. So a lot of agencies are kind of steering away from live-in care right now. Because if the caregiver wakes up, then, they don't get their sleep, and it turns into like a whole.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So if my mom needed care in the middle of the night, technically she's working, but she's not supposed to be working as well.
If she needed care in the middle of the night, then it really should be 2 12-hour shifts.
Right.
Then somebody's alert and oriented.
Yeah. She didn't, but that's an interesting point. People do. People do.
Yeah.
This is a very, people don't realize that this is a difficult business. You're dealing with seniors at the most vulnerable time. And again, it's not always seniors, but the bulk, like me too, the bulk, I'm dealing with seniors.
Right.
And where they're moving, because in my case, oftentimes they're not moving by choice. They're moving because they no one can manage to stay in their house. And there's stairs, there's too much overhead. I mean, there's the financial thing, the house just in such terrible condition. In your case, it's their physical being. Yeah. They can't stay either where they are, or they can't stay where they are independently. Correct. Those are the 2 choices. Right. And as I said before, we live in a very expensive place. So, if we stay here, we at least want what we pay for, if you will. Yeah. And finding a good aide to give you service is not so easy. Yeah. And
that's why, we're very picky about our caregivers too. And we don't hire somebody just to have a body. Right. If there is an issue, we address that issue. And if they need to be terminated, then they're terminated.
Right.
If it's something, because, families, like part of my job too is kind of like to reel in their expectations and like set realistic expectations.
Yep.
So if somebody's not cooking the food that you like per se, like that's not really like a terminatable.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I don't know.
That works.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But so I always say like there's like preferences, but then there's like, real care needs, if they're not showering properly, that's different, and then we'll kind of do like an in-service and try to correct that. And then if it's an ongoing issue, then we're like, no, I'm sorry. It's not the standards that we're going to send into a home.
Correct.
Yeah.
So when you say you said something before, and it was very interesting. I haven't heard of this, that you actually train the home health care workers. What does training look like?
Yeah, so they're going to come in with their certificate through New York State.
Right.
So either they can get that at our school where we'll, do their certification, or if they already have that, then we can hire them. They go through a boot camp with my agency where we make sure, like I said, that the level of care is on to our standards.
Right.
They'll get like retrained on Hoyer lifts and make sure that they could do that right. And there's like all different classes that they kind of have to go through. But we do have like the specific dementia training that they go through, which is a few hours that they have to make sure about like reapproaching and redirecting and different ways to, get tasks completed but without agitating the client. And then we have the PTSD training. The same thing. There's like so many different points, and it's really even drilled down to specific wartime veterans because each veteran has their own set of triggers.
Right.
Depending if they were Vietnam or if they're Gulf War. So, different age brackets and things like that. So, yeah. And then once a case is starting, when the nurse goes in to open up that case, we make sure the nurse is present when the aide is there. And then the nurse also will go through that care plan and kind of reinforce their skills to that specific client as well. And if it sends a replacement for whatever reason, we make sure that each caregiver who's going into the home is acclimated.
So you said something interesting, that either certified by New York State before they come to the program, or you certify them.
Correct.
So
they have to be a certified home health aide.
Okay. And your program, but you're talking about, is sort of extra education. It's not part of the certification at all.
It's an extra
Right.
layer.
So this seems like this is a classic example of the big company benefit with the boutique kind of feel.
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming the boutique companies do not have training programs necessarily.
Yeah, they probably, they might not have the bandwidth to be that specific for everything. Yeah. And we have the 3 branches, so we do everything at each local branch. Right. And even with the hiring process, like we have talent acquisition specialists for each area, and they just they have to have like their physical, and they have to be able to answer certain questions, and to make sure they're the right fit.
Right. Interesting. So I like to make these recordings very pragmatic. And if I am now, my mom let's assume my mom needs care.
Yeah.
I'm reaching out. I want to call somebody.
Yes.
How do I choose whom to call besides obviously calling Melanie?
Yeah.
And then what questions am I asking, and what's the process look like? How am I paying for this? Things of that nature. Is that too big a question for you?
No, not really. I mean, I can kind of break it down, like for our specific protocol that we kind of go through, and I would say, like, if you are shopping around, you really want to kind of speak with, if they're coming out of a facility like a rehab or a hospital, I always ask families, did you get any recommendation from like the PT at the rehab or from the discharge planners, the social workers, as far as scheduling, right? Because they'll know, like, okay, this person should not be left alone at all, right? So how many hours are you looking for? Like, that's the thing to kind of know in the back of your mind what you're looking for when you're calling. So you can ask, like, okay, so you have a minimum of hours, you have a minimum of days, what is your private pay rate? Say if you're paying out of pocket. Like I said, we work with 2 MLTCs, managed long-term care policies, through Community Medicaid, Centers Plan, and VNS in New York State. We also work with waiver programs, so the NHTD and TBI waiver. So it's nursing home transition deferment, which basically is saying that somebody requires a nursing home level of care, but they want to stay home in the community.
Okay.
Right. So that goes through Medicaid. We work with long-term care insurance policies. We do assignment of benefits with those policies, so the families are not laying out money.
Oh, that's nice.
Right. So that's something that you would ask too. If you have a long-term insurance policy, do you do assignment of benefits? Are we laying that out? And
that's huge.
yeah. So The only time they would pay is if they have like an overage from what their daily allowance is,
Right.
or if they have like a waiting period or something to that.
Right. You mentioned coming from a hospital. Oftentimes they get coverage from Medicare to come from a hospital.
And that's another thing too. So Medicare typically does not cover home care services, except a bath aid, they call it, which might be maybe like 2 to 4 hours a week for the first 4 to 8 weeks that they're home. It's short term. That benefit is only in place if they're receiving skilled care. So that PTOT, speech, wound care, skilled nursing.
Right.
If they're not getting skilled care, the HHA benefit stops. But again, that's just like a very small amount. So I always tell families, like, don't get too caught up on that.
Right.
You know, for a chronic long-term need, it really would be like Medicaid. There's catastrophic policies we work with through NYPD, FDNY, teachers, and like the VA, so their service-connected disability pension benefits.
Yep.
So if you have any access to any of these types of coverages, you need to find out if the agency works with any of them.
Right.
Just right out of the beginning, because most agencies now are private pay. So that'll check cross a lot of people.
And private pay, just for the record, means insurance is a form of private pay. People think private pay, you're writing a check.
I'm saying private pay. Like a lot of companies, that's all they take is just a check or a credit card. They don't work with anything.
But you can get your reimbursement in that case, or no, if they're private pay. So if I have a catastrophic policy and I go to a private pay company.
It depends on your benefits.
Right.
Sometimes you have to be one of like the agencies that they work with, or if you have like an out of network benefit.
Right.
Majority of the time, no, like it's just out of pocket. Yeah. So it's it adds up quickly.
I was a financial advisor working with retired New York City educators.
Okay.
And they had a catastrophic policy. Yes. Yep. Smart. And it wasn't that when I was there. I left that business a while ago. It used to be Wohlers years ago. It changed names multiple times. But it's one of those policies that was never expensive and people tend to forget to have. Because it was catastrophic. They bought it when they were 40. They're now 80. They don't even remember they're paying this little check every year. Maybe it's direct debited or whatever.
Right.
So if you have a catastrophic policy, look into it because they may forget.
100%.
And this years ago would give, I forgot what it was, the amount. It was like 2 years of coverage maybe at the time it was a couple $100 a day years ago. Yeah. So that's a lot of money. Yeah. And if you also have a long-term care policy on top of that, you could be fully covered.
Exactly.
So
and especially too, like a lot of the old long-term care policies were like use it or lose it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I have long-term care insurance. I've had it for quite a while now. I'm trying to remember when. I know it was before 2018. So I guess maybe 2016.
I've had mine for 22 years. That's a longer while.
Yeah. And mine's through Transamerica, and if I don't use my policy, I lose everything I paid into it, so it's definitely worth looking into. But that's something that you should ask these agencies, ask if they're a licensed agency, like through the New York State Department of Health. And then, I go through all of their personal care needs, and then we send out a service agreement.
Right.
And that's something to keep in mind too. Like, we don't have a contract where you're bound for a certain amount of time, or, this service agreement is so everybody's on the same page as far as expectation. Right. The proposed schedule, the rate would be on there if you are paying out of pocket before it transitions over to any of these programs. Payment information, healthcare proxy, power of attorney, HIPAA release forms, like all of that is on this service agreement.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So, we send that out. It's a DocuSign. It's very simple. We try to make it as easy as possible for families. And then, we send our nurse out. We also have a virtual nurse that's available that if it's a very quick start and we don't have time to get the nurse there before the person's, say, getting home from a hospital, we could do that virtually and then send the nurse in. We like I said, try to streamline things, but, it's still a little complicated because of the nature of it.
Oh, yeah.
I think
that's complicated.
I'm finding, though, there are some agencies now who take deposits and who
deposit for what?
care.
If the care.
Yeah, so say like I spoke to one woman and she was working with a company and they made her pay like a $10,000
Oh, wow.
deposit because she was getting 24-hour care and like it was a 2-week contract, like all these things. And I was like, yeah. I was like, no, so we don't do that.
You don't. Okay, that's good to hear. That doesn't sound logical to me.
No,
Yeah.
and that's what I say, things change, your needs change, or, so.
Correct.
Yeah.
My father was going to hospice tomorrow. Tomorrow morning at 9:00. He passed. They come to pick him up at 10:00. So the idea of it was good timing.
Okay.
The idea of paying $10,000 for care, you may not make it through $10,000 worth of care.
Exactly.
So
that's why I thought that was a little.
yeah, that's pretty aggressive. Yeah. That's good work.
And I am definitely not an aggressive person.
Right.
I never pressure people. I'll give you all the information. And,
Right.
I always say there's no obligation. I could pick my brain as long as you leave a little behind, but, and then I let families discuss it. I'll do conference calls. I'll do, Teams chat meetings with families because it is overwhelming.
Right.
And we have like 5 children and you're all trying to make a decision.
Yeah.
I never pressure
Yep.
people.
They don't always agree. The classic story of my life, real quickly, is I wanted my in-laws, my parents, to move into independent living. They shouldn't stay in their house at that point.
Yeah.
And my brother and sister said they're fine. But I see my parents all the time. They live 10 minutes away.
Right.
My brother lived in another country. My sister lived an hour away and saw a few times a year. And I said, but I see them every 3 times a week.
Right.
They need out. And 6 months later, my brother and sister came around and said, we agree with you.
Right.
Then it took 6 more months to convince my parents. But I
gosh.
had no prayer when it was me, my wife, and myself against the 4 of them.
Right.
So
it's crazy. It's always the out-of-state ones that had the biggest opinions.
They have the biggest opinions.
And it's like you said, it's just when you're not, because people could fool you for little drips and drabs, but it's like when you're around that person, then all of a sudden they get into that News 12 loop.
Right.
Well, there's no offense, News 12, is that maybe my next stop, but it's like when that's when you see like the repetitions happening, or so
right.
I just wish that people would like understand most of the time, or people have like somebody's best interests at heart.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah. Without it was no motivation for me to tell them to move.
Exactly.
And go through the trouble of doing it, because it was up to my wife and me to get this to happen.
Right.
But it just made and once they did, it was the best thing they ever did.
Yeah.
So
and that's also like on my side too, where people are just so apprehensive.
They don't want to,
especially when it's like a spouse who's like kind of relinquishing control to like somebody else. Yeah. But after we're in there for a little while and they're like, oh, I can leave. Yes. Or I can go to the store and I don't have to worry. Or, oh, my back isn't killing me anymore because I'm trying to shower somebody who's like, 1.5 feet bigger than or taller than me. And, it's just that fear of the unknown. But once it's not unknown anymore, it's like that relief. And I like want to call them back and be like, I told you to do this 2 weeks ago.
I was going to say, how many times is it not that way? Probably almost never.
Yeah.
It's the person who's getting care that the space is being invaded. They're being showered by a stranger. Yeah. That's got to be a tough thing. But once it happens, you realize it's necessary.
Yeah.
And
but also to try to say like it will restore the balance to the relationship that you have with like your significant other or like your children. Yeah. Where it's like, all right, so now they're not your caregiver anymore. Like you can just like hang out and have dinner and talk. And it's like, I don't know. I just think it goes back to the way it should have been, or it was, that it could be again.
I 100%. Living through it, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. And dealing with seniors my whole life. All my careers have been senior-based, not by choice, just by happenstance. Right. And but it's a very interesting conversation. I can tell you're so energized just talking about the topic, and you see the good that your agency does, and how it benefits people. You do the right thing. You stand separately and hopefully above the competition. You do the training, which I've never heard of that. So those are all big deals. And when me so selecting actually I can't say me. The one thing my sister, she chose the agency. Okay. So credit to you. But that's probably the single most important decision you can make is who are you getting to take care of your parents or your spouse or whomever. And it's nice to know someone's actually going through the trouble of making sure that people are properly trained, just not hiring people looking at a resume.
Right.
And that's huge. That's huge. So if there's a takeaway, one takeaway you would want from our whole 40-minute discussion or so, what would that most important takeaway be?
So I always say the days that you have your umbrella, it never rains, right? So the more prepared you are, hopefully you don't have to use it, but to do some research and kind of have like a little game plan before you're in a time of crisis. So even like those adult children that I was speaking with about their parents, like I hope they kind of have notes set aside for their children. So when the roles are, switched or not reversed, but you know what I mean? Like that they know or prepared for things, so whether it be taking out those insurance policies or, opening a trust or, protecting things just to make it easier on the people who are going to be making the decisions for you.
Right.
And it's topics that they're not fun and fuzzy but your children will thank you. And maybe, if you have, like, I always say, like, you should have a list of, like, God forbid something, this is the rehab that I would like to go to. This is the certified agency I'm comfortable with. This is my licensed agency. This is my elder law attorney. Just have, like, all those things on, like, one spot,
Yep. Absolutely. I think that's wonderful advice. I want to thank you for joining us today. I hope you had a wonderful time.
I absolutely did. Yes.
And yes. And how do people get hold of you?
So you can call me on my cell phone or text me, which is 516-385-2836.
Thank you for saying that slowly.
Thank you. I always do that with my families.
There you go. Say it again anyway.
Yeah, 516-385-2836. You can send me a text message. You can call me. I always ask, do you send texts? Because the adult children I'm working with are, still could be in their 70s if their parents are in their 90s.
Oh, that's interesting.
Or, email me. My email is my first name last name. So MELANIE Stephen STEPHEN at Allegiant ALLEGIANT homecare.com.
Got it.
Yes.
That's a lot.
Call her. It's just a lot, yeah. But I just wanted to put it out there too. So this way like the exact name of the company. It's Allegiant Homecare.
No, I think it was important. When I was spelling, I actually missed an I in there. So
oh yeah. I always say I'm like I'm not a giant, so I'm like 5'1", but my company is, so
there you go. Giant. Yes.
Phonetically.
Yeah. Correct. Well, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
I had a wonderful time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Unlocking Senior Resources podcast by Leave the Key. If you've enjoyed this episode or found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast. We specialize in working with seniors who are transitioning out of their homes, and we understand what you are going through. So if you are considering selling your home and would like an alternative to the traditional overwhelming process, reach out to see how we can help. When working with us, you can sell your home in its current condition, there is no need to remove unwanted items, and you control when the house is sold, along with so many other advantages. Visit leavethekey.com or call us at 631-388-7771 to learn more about our senior home buying process.